Board of Directors meeting. It is Wednesday, February 1st, 2023. We are here in the Freeport High School Library. We have a few folks missing this evening. Susanna and Jen won't be joining us. Colin will be, but he's running a couple minutes behind. And I did just want to let the board know that Jill Piker, who was our board representative, or one of our two board representatives from Pownell, has submitted her letter of resignation from the board. So we have let the town officials in Pownell know, so they can start their process of appointing someone to replace her until the June election when her seat was up. So thank you. Thank you, Jill, for your time here on the board. We have appreciated that and wish her well. And we'll get started with the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Adjustments? No?
None this evening.
Wonderful. So we will move on to good news and recognition. We'll go right to Tegan with our board student report.
Okay, so the Freeport High School paper, The Clarion, is holding a reverse caption contest, which gives students a chance to be featured in this year's Clarion and a chance at a prize. For athletics, the Freeport High School swim team won their meet last Friday against Bonnie Eagle, and a couple of students have qualified for states, and more are on the way to qualifying. The Freeport Falcon Winter Wear Fundraiser is selling hats to support the Freeport High School baseball teams. For visual and performing arts, the cornhole boards that the engineering and design classes made are still being auctioned off. Applications to the National Art Society are due February 29th for students in visual arts classes. February 6th is the Art Enrichment Program Info Session, which teaches students about a chance to study art in California for a semester. Financial Aid Night is March 2nd to help inform families how to navigate financial aid in college. March 16th is the Gap Year 101 Info Session, which teaches students interested in taking a gap year before college about their options. And for other news, today at Freeport High School was a college meeting for juniors and seniors in the FPAC, which provided helpful information for incoming college students. And lastly, this Friday is a so-called Teacher Torture Day, which means the students have the day off and the teachers do not.
I don't recall seeing that technical name on the calendar last week, but I'm sure it was in small print at the bottom. So thank you, Tegan. Welcome, Colin. Tegan asked that we move her up and leave you down there, but we didn't think that was fair, so. Just teasing. She said she wasn't moving unless we moved you two. None of these things are true. All right. Moving on. Public comment. I don't know if we have any members of the public here. We'll give folks a second if they're coming in. But we do have another opportunity at the end of our agenda if folks are interested and are joining us. But in the meantime, we will move on to number 8 on our agenda, reports from the superintendent.
And we have no additional items this evening to report out on.
Okay. So no administrator reports, no board comments, policy review, unfinished business. See how we fly through this agenda? All right, so we will move directly into new business, which is the meat of our meeting, actually really our only section of the meeting this evening. And we will start with the presentation from the superintendent for the 2022-2023 recommended budget. Did I turn on?
Well, I think we're all set now. Good evening. This evening, we're going to look at the superintendent's recommended budget for FY24. And if we look at our mission and our vision and strategic goals, everything we do in our budget is related directly to these things. In that, our vision is that all our students graduate as compassionate, honest, and respectful citizens who learn to contribute to their communities for life. And you'll see how that ties in as we go through our goals. Our October 1 count that you see there, and we look at the numbers from October 1, 2021 to October 1, 2022, real numbers is that there was an increase of 76 students, and we're projected for next year an increase of 21 students. We break it up a little further for you, October 1 by grade span. If you look at the projected numbers, pre-K 5, there's an addition of 24 students projected. Grades 6 to 8, 17 less, and 9 to 12, 14 more, and that gives you the projected addition of 21 students. Our projected class sizes are there. And one that is going to tie into a request that you're going to see later on is Durham, grade 6. There's definitely been a pop in that particular grade level. So later on, you'll be seeing where we're asking for an additional teacher. There are 3 areas in the budget, our goals. First of all is to maintain class size, increase student support. And then the third one is when we're really looking at our requests for facilities and transportation is to support the infrastructure and provide a safe learning environment. Our administrative team spent a lot of time looking at priorities for the district. Our first priority, I mentioned earlier, is that classroom teacher in grade 6 at Durham due to class size. And also at Moore Street School, a 0.2 PE teacher. They have 0.8 right now due to the number of students requiring physical education. The second priority is an assistant principal at Moore Street School for 190 days for $100,000. And I'll be talking more about some of the backup data and support for why we're making these requests. We're asking for a 0.5 health teacher at Durham for some equity in the curriculum. And then 0.5 social workers at the high school, at Freeport Middle, and at Durham. We're asking for a board-certified behavior analyst, a BCBA, district-wide for $90,000, and then an athletic trainer for the high school, which I know we've talked about last year, you've talked about as a board, for $42,500. The third priority for our team, coaches at JV golf and first team baseball. And you'll find later on when Mr. Sickles does his presentation, that actually would be a budget neutral request. And the third priority was some additional days for the assistant principal at Freeport Middle. If we look at focus area 1 to maintain class sizes, that's where our request for additional teachers comes from. The 6th grade teacher at Durham and the 0.2 at Moore Street. The overall financial impact for those 2 positions would be $104,000. And it's directly related to strategic goal number 2, that all our students regularly engage in meaningful student-centered learning. Focus area 2, increasing student supports. It's related to our strategic goal that all students experience a joyful learning climate that is safe, nurturing, and fosters curiosity. And that's where you'll see all those additional personnel I mentioned in request 2 for a financial impact for $412,500. To break these out a little bit more, I'd like to talk a little bit about the assistant principal at Moore Street. And you'll be hearing more detail from Mrs. Nickerson when she does her presentation. But some supporting data for that is we do know that there has been increased enrollment trend at Moore Street School. In 2017, there were 240 students. Our projected enrollment for the fall of 2023 is 325. During that time, we've added 4 additional classroom teachers in 6 sessions of pre-K. And we've increased from 1 specialized program for special education to 4 specialized programs. So there's definitely a need for some additional administrative support for our students. In number 2, again, we'll look at, we're going to take these folks as a chunk, our health teacher, our halftime health teacher, our 3 halftime social workers, and the BCBA district-wide. That financial impact is $270,000. And we heard some very compelling evidence from our administration from Durham, the middle school and the high school a couple of meetings ago about our MIAS data that we found out that 29.3% of our kids in grades 7 to 8 felt sad for 2 weeks or more in a row. That stopped them from doing some usual activities. 23.1% seriously thought about killing themselves. 34.2% felt it would be sort of easy or very easy to acquire alcohol if they wanted it, and 15.3% reported it'd be easy to get marijuana. From a high school, some of that data, that compelling data we heard, 34% felt sad or hopeless almost every day for 2 weeks or more in a row. 16.8% seriously thought about attempting suicide. 31% had at least one drink in the past 30 days. 67% reported it was somewhat easy or very easy to get alcohol. 32% have vaped. 21% have used marijuana at least once in the last 30 days. And 6% used prescription drugs that weren't theirs in the last 30 days. Some things that we have tried. There's still ongoing work from the Boost Committee, which is our dropout prevention committee that has been very active looking how to support individual students. We've implemented responsive classroom practices pre-K-5. We've enhanced advisory systems. There's been a lot of professional development regarding trauma-informed practices for our staff. We continue to provide opportunities for education on drug and alcohol use, working to foster connections with trusted adults. We recently we're proud to learn that the high school is partnering with Kyle Cares and the JED Foundations to help get more supports for mental health for students. And in previous budgets, you did add a halftime guidance counselor in Durham and a halftime social workers for students with disabilities at the high school in some of your previous budgets. The halftime social worker at the middle school and the high school, those requests are actually funded through the elementary and secondary school emergency relief funds, the ESSER funds, and that funding is ending. So that we have folks that are working for us now in those capacities, but that halftime funding will be gone after this year. Looking again, the same area, focus area 2, increasing student supports. That's where we have the athletic trainer at the high school for $42,500. We do know that 58% of our high school students participated in athletics in the 21-22 school year, which was phenomenal. It was a rebound to those pre-COVID levels. And the previous action staffs that we've attempted to use some contracted services, and Mr. Sickles will be talking more about that. We're looking at the goal 3. That's when we're talking about the infrastructure to provide a safe learning environment. And that's linked to our strategic goal number 4, that we have a well-developed and refined finance, human resources, facilities, transportation, food service system to support learning of all our students. And in those requests, you will see we'd like to add $40,000 to the tennis reserve account. Currently, your balance is $70,000. And increase the track and field reserve account by $35,000, and your current balance is $175,000. And then there's a $400,000 for overall capital improvements. And before Mr. Willett left us, he did share his capital improvement plan, and we're asking to upgrade public address systems in the high school, Freeport Middle, and Moore Street School, upgrade a door lock software in Durham, correct the outdoor speaker system at Moore Street, upgrade the PA at Pownell, some shades for all the classrooms, and latching mechanism for doors. And at the middle school, Freeport Middle School, we need to replace some outside doors and frames, and then a small amount left in capital reserves for other projects. And if you recall, all of those things are related directly to the safety of our students and staff in our buildings. We always look for areas that we've provided some savings to get the budget figure down. We were able to move some strategists that we have from the local budget to Title I funding for $100,000 that would decrease the local budget. We've reduced advertising fees by $4,000 because those there are other ways that we advertise now. It's not sending advertisements to the Portland Press Herald and having people look in the Sunday paper anymore. There are other ways that work better, so we reduced that. We have $4,448 in telephone savings, and you did retire a high school renovation bond for $258,425. And in your debt service, we have an interest reduction of $42,209. And the final savings we found was electricity for $6,641 that will all support reducing the impact to the taxpayer. So a recommended operating budget for this, we had the operating budget, oops, I'm sorry, I missed a slide. Operator error. There we go. Try again. This year's adopted operating budget is $37,111,151 dollars. With the addition of the adult ed budget, as you know, to bring it up to $37,223,151. For the proposed FY24 budget, we're recommending a budget with adult education for $38,884,699. That would be this is just the expenditure side. We're not looking at the revenues tonight, for a 4.46% increase. And at the bottom, you'll see some savings as the Durham. We have the Durham non-shared debt assessment on DCS. That's going down a little bit, as is the total state and non-shared debt. Looking at an operating budget history, we looked at the 10-year history and where we have for expenditure increases over time. And the next graphic, you will see there's a graph that shows that increase in the expenditure side, the history over time. And for members of the public who may be watching this, all these documents are already posted online on our budget information. And the biggest way we have it, of that increase, 3.8% is estimated increased district-wide salary and benefits of that increase. And the other thing we need to remember, drivers of increase, is that the district was able to leverage the ESSER funds for a long time, the COVID money, and that's no longer available. And so those things that we value that are important, such as the social workers, now have to come to the local side. We look by articles, what those drivers are. I'll just give a few highlights here. It's very detailed in our handbook. For example, there's the 1 FTE grade 6 teacher at Durham for $90,000. We've got a half-time health teacher at Durham for $45,000, and the .2 PE teacher at Moore Street for $14,000, as well as several other things you'll see throughout. JMG fee has increased, so we have 3 schools that will have an additional $2,000 for that. We have an increase in our SRO that we're funding through the town that we found out. We have some furniture increase there. We go to Article 2. That's where you're going to see the BCBA, $90,000. There wasn't a line for tutoring services for homebound and hospitalized students, and we have certainly a need for that. So there's $15,000 we put in there. Again, $15,000 in the legal side for special education. One thing that you're going to see later on when we have presentations, when Dr. Sellers does her budget, you're going to see, and you look at our actual by article, it's going to look like that's up a lot. And part of that reason that is up is that we realized the early intervention team, which was supposed to be split 40% Article 1 regular ed, and then the 60 through special education. What we have learned that is not an allowable expense under Article 1 when we start to try to do some billing. So we're shifting it to Article 2 special education. It is an allowable expense there. So when she does her presentation, you will notice a difference there. But in terms of the budget itself is budget neutral for us because it's in the same budget. It's just in a different article for us. But I did want to point that out. And go to Article 3, that's Region 10, and a small increase there. When we get to Article 4, all other instruction, and Mr. Sickles will explain tonight, there is a huge increase in official fees from the MPA, and that's something we can't control, for $12,626. We're asking for the athletic trainer. We have more girls playing co-op ice hockey, which is wonderful, but that's at an additional fee for that. We're requesting a choreographer for the musical for $1,272. And cyber insurance is under that, and that's $16,500 for that. In Article 5, that's where you see all our social workers. You'll see the SAT exam is in there for $8,760. And when we really did a careful examination of this year's budget, we found that that wasn't in the budget. It was talked about, but the dollar figures want to make sure it's in there, as well as a PDSAT for 10th graders. For system-wide administration, we have a new financial module through Tyler Tech, and there's a lot of training that has to be done for our business folks. So there's $2,500 there, and an increase in audit fee for $10,000. School-wide administration, that's where you'll find in Article 7, the assistant principal at Moore Street. Transportation, we did an analysis of fuel, and we're recommending an additional $79,095 for our buses. In addition, another $10,000 for purchase, repair, and maintenance increase, because we're finding that our mechanic is still driving bus very often, and we have to sometimes take the buses elsewhere. So we want to make sure we had money for that. And insurance increase, the estimate is $12,284. Looking at facilities and maintenance, water and sewage is up for our buildings that use that water and sewage. There's some additional repairs and maintenance that are planned for $15,395. Again, there's an insurance increase. Heating oil, we're estimating we need another $12,000. And then there's at 3 of our schools, there's again some additional major maintenance that's coming up. And then that's where you'll find the reserve accounts for the track and for the tennis courts added there. Priority 3, not included. That's where the JV golf and first team baseball and the 10 additional days for the middle school principal. The unknowns. Region 10, we're not sure. We put in a 2.93% increase, but that's a guess, as well as property and casualty insurance at about 20%. And we are in negotiations for our EPS staff, so we're not sure with that at this time. The last piece there's a lot of information for budget process timeline that certainly there's the board's work you're doing, and then there'll be opportunities, lots of opportunities for our community to provide input and review the budget. And I get us back to our mission and vision, because that's why we're here for the kids, and we believe this budget really hits our mission to inspire and support every learner by challenging minds, building character, sparking creativity, nurturing passions, so all students will graduate as compassionate, honest, and respectful citizens who learn and contribute to their communities for life. And you'll have an opportunity this evening as we move along through the agenda, to hear from some of our administrators who will present some specifics of their budget.
Oh, Colin got a new microphone. Okay, so typically at this point, usually this presentation happens last week, and then we have some time to digest, and then we sort of jump into the individual requests from the presenters that we have on the docket for tonight. So I guess my question is, or my ask of you guys is do you have any questions kind of high level around the budget and not sort of specific about individual asks that we can dig deeper once we have Ray and Will and Jen? And I think we have one more. Who's our fourth tonight? Craig. Does anybody have any highlight? Yeah, Kara.
This might just be a newbie question, but I noticed a lot of insurance increases, and is there much shopping around that's done to see if there are less than...
Speaking of insurance, why, that's perfect timing, because why, yes, we can this year.
Well, I think what we're looking at, I don't think, well, so we're part of the MSBA Property and Casualty Trust. So they have a self-funded insurance trust set up that districts are eligible to join. And then they go out and solicit the individual providers and carriers and come back to the trust with this is what the insurance is. We are a member of that and have been for some time. We do have the ability to go out and if we want to go out to bid on our whole property and casualty insurance, not sort of individual line items, but like the whole thing, we can do that. We are required by our agreement with them to give them 1 year's notice before we would do that. As someone who is on the MSBA Property Casualty Trust Board, lucky me, learned tons about insurance that I never knew before. Very interesting work. But I will tell you that it is not, the increases we're seeing are not, we're not special. If anything, ours tend to be better than what other people are seeing with other carriers. But it is certainly something that we could go out to bid and just confirm that. I believe the last time we went out to bid, we ended up staying, but it's not a bad exercise to do. So it's something we could consider. We would have to basically give them notice. This year we're sort of locked in because we didn't give the year notice, but we could do that for the upcoming year if we wanted to go out to bid next year.
Does that also include like the cyber insurance, or is that?
The cyber insurance is a very specific piece of that. And what that does is it provides a lot of things. Most of the insurance carriers don't even offer it. It's not even offering because the potential is really high because districts tend to be targets for cyber attacks, ransomwares, things like that. So the fact that this is even an offer to us is great because it does protect us more than just, it's a pretty robust coverage, in my opinion. So it is a part of that total pool. And likely if we went outside of the MSBA trust, we wouldn't have that kind of coverage. But it's an option. We can always ask. I like your new mic. Colin.
Thanks. Is this mic work? Good. Thanks so much, Jean. I wondered if you could speak a little bit to what didn't even make the third priority tier. Because I think sometimes when this budget goes out and the public sees it, it's sort of a sense of we only are including everything that we want, and then the argument is really, do we get everything that we want? But my sense is that there tends to be other things that are on this that don't make this priority, these three tiers of priority. So I wondered if you could just speak a little bit to what are some things that were discussed that just didn't make. That did not rise to the level of importance that these other pieces did.
And so when the administrative team gets together, we spend several meetings really thinking about what our needs are, and we throw lots of stuff out that we think might be a good idea to move the district forward for our mission and vision. But sometimes there are items that we haven't thought it through enough to bring it to the board. And, there were some discussions about some things like that we said, this is something we want to flush out a little bit more, and perhaps you'll see it in another budget year. But that's where it is. And even within the own individual school budgets, people are looking at what are the things we really need to have. Are there some other things that will continue to move us forward that way? So it was really a team decision about that. And there was, one particular item I think of that we said, this isn't ready yet. We need some more time, do some more research on this.
Yeah, I'm just curious if you could please explain a little bit better what the board certified behavioral analyst will provide to the school district.
I'm going to ask Dr. Sellers to come up. That's going to be in her budget, unless we could. That she will be explaining more when she presents, unless that's information you need now. But that's her ask. So when she comes to present, she will explain all of that.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Maura.
Thank you so much, Jean, for the presentation. The mics are quiet tonight, I feel like. I seem to recall last year the athletic trainer and then also maybe a part-time 0.2 equity officer position were the things that were not included in the budget, but were maybe on that tier 3. Was there any talk about that equity, that part-time equity position this year?
There was not. That was not something that was brought forward by the team. Okay. The athletic, the trainer was.
Okay, thank you.
Could you give us a little bit of detail around the enrollment projections, and what does that include for our new Manor students that joined us over the last year? Is the assumption that they all return next year, based on? I know it's a.
Yeah, then that's the tricky part. So when we started this process, and for our new members of the board too, sometimes when we're calculating what teachers need, they're looking at that enrollment. Because, for example, if you are buying math journals for fifth graders, and you want to make sure you have math journals for all fifth graders. So that's why we're really looking at their enrollment for calculations for things like that. So when we had that, the new Mainers were all still here. So at this point, we haven't backed out any of those numbers, but we are watching those numbers right now. And I get weekly reports on how many folks that we still have, because that may come into play later on. In terms of, could we say we could not have a whole teacher? It wouldn't work that way because they're spread out. So it would be more in the calculations for that. It would be more in things like the math journals, some of those how much we could do for art supplies. That's where those calculations would come in. But the enrollment you see was the enrollment we had prior to any news of the new Mainers.
And then, so the increase is just organic growth into the district based on the additional 20 that we're seeing. So we're assuming all of them that are here are staying, even though we think that's unlikely at this point from what we know?
It was based on the projected, and then looking at, we always look at the incoming 4-year-olds and incoming of their additional kindergartners. That's on the end where you really look at that additional students.
Okay. And while they're spread across all the different grade levels, we did sort of beef up our multilingual learner teachers as a result of them joining us, that if a large majority or most or half or whatever were not with us next year, that number might change.
That's where we're looking at, but some of those folks are 1-year only positions that we funded, so those would go away at the end of the year. And I'm also looking, it's not just our new Mainers, but I'm having our data specialist pull how many total multilingual learners we have, because we still need service. They may not be new Mainers, but they're still kids that need services.
Sure, because we always had, we've always had,
right.
So
there'll still be a need, but some of the positions we have right now, some of the folks are 1 year only.
So really those should potentially, I'm looking at Peggy for this answer, show up in the savings, because those positions were funded this year but not funded for next year. So is that
they were through savings. Oh, there's Peggy.
We funded
two
in this current budget. We funded 2 FTEs in this new budget.
Okay. So they were.
But we've had additional on top of that, as she said, as 1 year old. We've had 3.6 altogether, I believe.
Okay. So were those funded with ESSER funds?
With one was we came and asked for the money for that. Another one was added prior to the budget, the budget adoption.
Right. So I guess my question is if we had 3.6 funded last year and we have 2 funded next year, isn't that a savings?
We have 2 funded this year. We have 2 funded in the new budget. So the additional 1.6 we were paying for through cost savings.
Through savings.
Gotcha.
So it's not really budget neutral if the 2 are still in there.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you for that. Any other 30,000-foot questions? Maura?
I'm just assuming this won't come up in another presentation. The SRO, is that a salary increase that's coming from the
From the town.
department?
Coming
Okay.
from the town.
Thank you.
Yes.
I don't think anybody covered, well, it might be covered in the facilities one. I know we had increased our heating oil line last year because we are concerned around the cost of increases, and we're looking to increase it even more this year. So I was curious how we did on that last year or in this current year. And that might all change after this weekend when it's -50.
That could change.
Yeah. And then just to clarify, the reserve accounts for the track and field and the tennis, they sort of are portrayed here as increases, but these have been funded for the last several years out of the budget, so they're not new. It's just we're continuing to invest in those reserve accounts. Is that correct?
That's our recommendation, that we continue to do that.
Okay. So, because most of the other stuff that we address are increases to the budget, new positions, new stipends, etc. So I just want it to be clear that even though it's listed here, it's not an increase to the budget. It is the same amount that we have historically funded for those two reserve accounts, just in case anybody's interested. All right. Let's see, who's up first? So we'll move from the overall budget and we will move on to the Durham Community School budget review with Principal Pinn.
Okay. To help on the budget, I'm going to auction off this laptop right here. Thank you. Okay, good evening, everybody. I'm not projecting it because I believe you all have the sheet in front of you. As the Superintendent just mentioned, for our DCS, our student population is anticipated to be 479 next year, which is an increase of 16 from the current year, or 4%. As I sort of mentioned, it feels like each year the school has slowly grown over the past 6 years, from 420 to 479 now, 14% increase. As you know, some of that was due to the addition of a third pre-K section in 2021, and some is across all the grade levels, just as younger families are moving into Durham and starting to attend school. The most significant part to that budget-wise has been staffing. We had at one point within our 10 grade levels, 5 of those grade levels had 2 classes per grade level, and this coming year, 9 of our 10 grade levels will have 3 sections. For those of you who are not so familiar with our school, it's always a little bit of a tricky number because it's always kind of cuspy. We'll be at 48 students, and in some grade levels, in our upper grades, we might go at 24, but in our lower grades, that means we have 3 sections that are relatively small in that regard. So it's a challenge between when we move from 2 to 3 and where they are in the sort of 10-year progression. A number of years ago, we had a multi-age class to try and accommodate that. But the challenge was that the moving curriculum and the curriculum demands meant that it just wasn't feasible in that regard. So we had experimented with that, then moved away from it. So for next year, our current 5th grade is in 3 sections, and they will be moving up to 6th grade, requiring 3 sections at 6th grade. But coming up behind that is all 3 sections. So that is what has led to this additional need in the 6th grade. That the cohorts all coming up the ladder will require 3 sections, and that group of 6th graders moving into 7-8, they will be in 2 sections in 7th grade. You also heard Jean explain about 2 of our requests for consideration. So one is a 0.5 wellness health teacher. We currently do not have a specific health teacher. It is a curriculum requirement in middle school. FMS has a health teacher, and we teach health through our phys ed classes, wellness classes. But one of the pieces that we've become really aware of this last couple of years with the increase in sort of mental health concerns at school is that both of those curriculums are really required, and exposure to both of those aspects of wellness really need to be emphasized in middle school. And one person working with the time frame we have is unable to do both those curriculums justice. So we have looked at this, and we believe that a half-time position would be able to meet those needs of the required health curriculum, but also maintaining the focus on wellness and bring a more comprehensive kind of experience to the kids in those areas. As Jean mentioned, what a major concern for us was this most recent MIAS data, with the increase in the number of students reporting feeling sad and hopeless, and as I mentioned previously, those even having considered suicide. So maintaining that focus as an ongoing commitment is one of our big asks. In addition to that, and you heard Jean mention the work that the administrative team has done, and it's not just the school principals, the directors. We really have dug into that health data, also our own observational, anecdotal data around how students are doing, what needs exist, and then we discuss what strategies are being used at different schools or in different programs, what's been effective. And so sometimes, and for those who've been on the board for a while, you'll have remembered this with the RTI process. We had a couple of schools who'd started out with some RTI and then had it working effectively as a model, and then that was added to other schools. Over the last couple of years, some of the schools have added in additional social work support that is non-special education. So at our school, the only social work support we have is for students with IEPs in special education. So there's no social work support for students who are not identified. We do strive to bring in opportunities for families who can access that through insurance with some agency social work support, that counseling can happen at school, which is often the best way for children to actually be able to access it consistently. But that has become challenging to actually always have somebody present. Again, in learning from our colleagues in other schools, this has been seen as an effective and impactful position, and therefore DCS is requesting that role for next year also as a half-time social work. I'm just going to keep rolling through. If you have questions, feel free to shout them out. You'll see there the table of students to teachers, and as you can see, right, third grade to me is a great example of that cuspy number. So classes of 15 is really generous, and classes of 22, 23 in third grade is right on that edge of not quite making it. That group of 45, if they were to remain at 45 when they hit the upper grades, that might be a group we'd be looking at, depending on what their needs are, of saying, okay, 22, 23 at that age is going to be fine. And then either side of them, you see we've got like a 52 and a 50 or a 55, where those become more solid numbers. So just to talk a little bit about the positions that were added into this year's budget from last year, and give a summary of the impact of these. We added a teacher that went into first grade. We'd had 2 sections there last year. And then I'm going to circle back to early intervention in just a moment. Our yoga club, we had piloted that last year and then added it in this year. It's been a great addition, and a number of students accessed that. The leadership team stipends we added have been very significant. So what that enables us to do is, because of the number of grade levels we've had on our leadership team, we always had somebody representing 2 grade levels, and we structure the school so that those 2 teams, so for example, first and second grade, would have planning time at the same time of the day. The students would all be at specials, and it would allow for them to work as a team, and one person could sort of like lead that team. Likewise, grades 3, 4, likewise, grades 5, 6. But as I mentioned a moment ago about the impact of sort of specializing really around content and curriculum and leveraging that deep understanding of content to moving student learning, and the impact that it had on multi-age, it was a struggle for us with our leadership team because they ended up sort of defaulting to a common denominator, which wasn't always the highest leverage point for student learning. What a second grader might need at this time of year is very different from what a first grader is working at. What a sixth grader is working at is very different from what fifth graders in terms of the structure of the classes. So by adding those three leadership team stipends, it allows us to have a team leader at each grade level. And that has really impacted the work we do around our intervention rounds and teachers, I beg your pardon, looking at and discussing shared student data at the grade level perspective as opposed to class by class, which is a big part of our work around having all students seen as our students, not necessarily this teacher's or that teacher's. So they're able to look at and compare students who are learning. They can look at particular curriculum pieces that were challenging and share strategies on how to lift or extend students. So that has been a great addition. The two technology integrator stipends, that has not been quite as successful. So we were unable to fill one of those this year. One of the pieces, we've seen it with coaching, we've seen it with other stipends. We've only just managed to get somebody to do yearbook for our middle school students. Usually that something starts in the fall. But a lot of these roles that were filled by teachers are just flat out. Time is actually the biggest value and commodity. And so a lot of people are just feeling they don't have the time to do an additional club or activity. I had spoken with Jean about it and left it in this year because we're still hopeful for that position. Obviously, that money wasn't spent. But if we're unable to fill that next year, then we would just remove it at that point. The EdTech 3, also really significant benefit. This is a role that we had, you'll hear about this from other schools, we had utilized some of the ESSA funds during COVID to bring in sort of like, in essence, a floating guest teacher, metaphorically, obviously, not some sort of phenomena. That would be cool and could be a fundraiser. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we utilize them on really rainy days. So the floating guest teacher, which sounds really awkward now, I would say has covered a class every single day since the beginning of school year. So even, and ironically, just today we thought this might be the first day where we haven't actually needed to cover somebody, and then literally 5 minutes later that occurred. So that has been really impactful. And one of the things we had talked with you all about last year in terms of adding these roles, because this had been a wrestle budget-wise for us collectively over numerous years, the idea of having a quote-unquote bench sub. And then we really saw the benefits of that again over that last 2-year cycle. And one of the pieces we had explained, which has really come to fruition, is the benefit of this person being in the school is that they get to know the children and the children get to know them. So that when they are covering, that essential component of relationships exists. And it's a much more productive day. Equally, the person is familiar with the classes or the teacher, and therefore, again, their focus is on making sure the plans that were left are actually carried out, and that the students are having a more productive learning day. So it's been a great help. Then the piece at the bottom there, add 3 days of guidance work. That also was really impactful. What we have found is that there's new construction or people moving in over the summer. Oftentimes people don't arrive until quite late. We have step up in the spring. And so what we did there is we have 1.5 counselors at our school, and they did 6 half days between them where we were able to schedule Tuesdays and Thursdays in August so that any new families moving to town, either there would be phone calls to them to check in, learn about their children, learn about where they're coming in from, or setting up school visits, but really trying to transition in new families to say they felt welcomed and prepared, but also that we had the information we needed to support those children on day one. And in the past, our counselors started the same as teachers, technically 2 days before school with those PD days. So those days were also impactful. I said I'd circle back to early intervention team. To start the year, it was they weren't able to really fulfill that role at first, because I think you're aware they provided a really essential service in supporting at Moore Street School, while collectively we had to get some staffing pieces in place to support the students' needs there. And they were incredibly flexible and impactful in that work. But then we were thrilled to then be able to get them into their specific roles, and they are now working across all 3 schools. And it's that same, in a way, already we see that same benefit from what I was just mentioning with a floating sub who knows the children. Consistency, connections with the teachers. They're not missing days or sessions with children. Children are getting the specific IEP needs and time that is on their IEP. Sometimes we had, as you know, CDS providers were sometimes inconsistent or unable to attend. They are able to observe and give feedback and consult and give teachers strategies. So the relationships with the teachers are obviously that much stronger too. So it's still relatively early in this process, but we are really encouraged by how it is coming together at this point in time. Then there's always one other. The last piece is that bottom line. It says anything else that has a significant budget impact. We have also requested $1,500 in the budget for a second author visit. We have one currently budgeted. This allows us to have one at the kind of elementary level or one at the upper school level. And those are the budget requests and kind of summaries for DCS. If anybody has any questions.
Maura. Excuse me. Thank you so much. Well, really informative. I see that, as you mentioned, we added a pre-K section in 2021, which is great. And it looks like the cohort of pre-K is about the same numbers. Would you say we're serving everyone in the community who wants pre-K?
Yes. So this allows us to have a capacity of 48. We predict 48, but obviously we don't know whether 48. We're just starting registrations now. That is our cap, not necessarily our real number. And this last 2 years, we have had capacity to accept more. Oops. That's not what I wanted. So, but we've not been able, since we went to that third section, we've not had to turn anyone away. Then what happens a little bit, and it means that initially what we do across the 3 schools with pre-K is we register and screen children at their quote-unquote home school. And then there are times where, for example, if Pownell was oversubscribed and we had space, or Moore Street had space, then those families would be offered a space at one of our schools. Or sometimes there's, we have a student who lives in Freeport, but whose childcare has been in Durham since the very beginning, and until there's full day school, it's hard. And so if there's space, then they request a superintendent's agreement, and then later in the summer, if there's space, then that agreement can be made too. So there's a little bit of movement between to accommodate overflow, but for us, we have capacity at this point to accommodate any students who have requested it.
Thank you so much.
Beth.
Just to clarify, when you say when you're requesting for the wellness and health teacher and you're saying that you're unable to provide, that means like going forward, correct? Like you haven't had an issue where you're not able to provide in the past, but it's because of the incoming numbers. Is that correct?
For health and wellness?
Yes.
No, we've not been able to provide in the past.
Okay.
And we've kind of got by.
Okay.
And the impact of the last couple of years and the data we are now seeing that we are attributing to the impact of the last couple of years is highlighting for us that we can't meet this need with the model that we've had currently and previously. And so, when we looked at that, to add in the specific kind of all the specific elements of the health curriculum, it would basically remove the phys ed curriculum. And we don't think it should be an either or. In most middle school settings, currently at FMS2, it's not an either or, it's both. And it was really more because of our numbers. We had sort of merged it, but it just feels like such a big area of concern right now that we want to ensure that kids are getting both.
Yeah, thank you. I was wondering how long that had been going on, but I'm really happy that you're moving to the model of having it separate, because I do think that that's valuable for the kids. So
yeah.
And I think it aligns with how we've sort of grown the support in Durham over the past several years. If you guys recall, and this is a nice one because it's sort of a clean split between PE and health. You can add a half-time health teacher. We've added an additional guidance counselor support to I think that's at 1.5. We've added some library support because when you look at, we had one full-time specialist serving almost 500 kids. It's a lot, right? And, they do a fantastic job with the time they have. But over the past several years, we've really been trying to align those. And I think it even says in there for equity of curriculum to make sure that they're getting the support from their specialist teachers. So I was really happy to see that because I think it is time to make that happen for the kids. My question for you was around the 6th grade teacher.
Yeah.
I know historically, 6th grade, we've had 2 teachers. One does science and math, and the other one does social studies and English. How does adding a 3rd teacher change that dynamic?
Right. So we had 3 last year, actually.
Okay.
And so what we do is the day is currently in 3 sections for them. And what they would currently have is a language arts block, a math block, and then either science or social studies in that 3rd block. What happens and they alternate days, so they have science, social studies. What happens when we have 3 sections, then it goes to, in the 3 sections, you are either in math, language arts, or science, social studies. And so the students will have that across their day. They'll have it in the same way that they do now, but the numbers are split across 3 teachers rather than merging into 2 teachers teaching it. So one teacher does science, social studies, and then the other 2 specialize on language arts and math. And
I guess my other question, and I don't know if this is the way it is now, but it's showing 7th and 8th as 2 for 7th grade and 3 for 8th grade. And haven't historically 7th and 8th grade shared the same teacher? So how is there an extra teacher?
They do, but we try. It's really hard to complete in the table to try and explain. So those are the sections rather than the teachers. So as Michelle points out there, for those who are not familiar with our model, when you see 2 for 7 and 3 for 8, those 5 teachers, there's one math teacher teaching 5 sections, and it would be next year would be 2 of 7th grade and 3 of 8th grade. This year it is currently 3 in 7th grade and 2 in 8th grade. But those are the teachers across that 2 grade span, and they do teach subject specific.
Perfect, thanks. Colin.
Yeah, thanks so much for this. And my question is about the 0.5 social worker, and I know that that's also, of course, an ask on the Freeport Middle and Freeport High Schools. I don't know if it's appropriate for any sort of tag team answer to this question, because I think my question is, I think we've both from what you've echoed here and what Gina said and the previous information we've received in terms of the trends we're seeing in terms of the struggles that our students are having with mental health. I think that sort of clear and present need is apparent. how do you understand, and how do you and your colleagues understand what the impact of this particular ask will be? In other words, by having this 0.5 social worker in your school, what is on the one hand, as I see a therapist myself, and so I know that there is an immediate difference that is made by seeing a professional, mental health professional. But measuring it is a little tricky. So I guess I'm just sort of curious how you go about thinking about that, and how, I guess how we're supposed to conceptualize that.
Yeah, it's a great question, and Ray and Jen might be able to give you a more thorough answer because it's a position they have currently. I can tell you how we're envisioning it. Within special education, for example, social work is not a standalone service per se. The way in which students access it right now is restrictive. But what we have done the last few years across all our academic areas and with behaviors is with RTI, or responses to intervention. And so a practice that we have, we're still constantly learning in, but are getting stronger in, is developing specific plans that are focused on a specific goal, and then tracking that and progress monitoring that data to see its impact. So we are really looking at this service as, or this role as contributing into our sort of RTIB sort of perspective. So we would anticipate having, a specific, we call them SIP plans, but student intervention plans, with a specific targeted goal for that. And we'll be looking at, were students able to meet their goal? Were they able to move on to not necessarily needing that support moving forward, and having the skills and supports then and the agency to be able to access and function in their educational program without that level of support. I think there are times, like because we've had, I mentioned contracted service people in some of these roles. There are also times where it leads to conversations with families around a child potentially needing a different type of support or additional support that would be needed outside of the school setting. So in those ones, obviously, it has a different sort of transition plan. But I think that's how we envision it functioning at this point, and which is sort of how it also works in special education for students who have social work on their IEP. Every time there's an IEP meeting, that we consider all their services, we consider their progress relative to each of their goals. And if a student is met their goal and it's determined that they no longer need that level of support, then they would exit either, in that case, special education, or maybe that particular service or support is no longer on their plan. So, we would continue to sort of like, just as we do with all the other resources, we'd be meeting, is it working? Is it impactful? Is it meeting the goal? Is it still necessary?
Kelly.
Just to kind of follow up to that, I'm just curious if this half-time social worker is planning on being shared with, say, the middle school for the purposes of continuity and seeing, if that same person is seeing similar issues across the schools.
I think that, Ray, you have this role in place right now, right?
We have someone in place right now that's employed with COVID funds.
Right. So we haven't necessarily determined staffing. Are you suggesting would they be like mornings with us and after, or vice versa, like work between FMS and DCS? Yeah, I'm not sure. We haven't really got to the place of like determining how might that work. And there are certainly times where, as we do share some staff. And if it was like, wow, there's this amazing person who wants to work full time and it would fit to do both, then that's certainly a potential. But we haven't really got that far down the line with like determining kind of how that would split or that would work. There are a number of people who actually seek out half-time roles because they also are sometimes in private practice. So there's some folks who actually look for that as well. So we're hopeful that we would be able to fill it either in a half-time, or if it worked across the district, then in a full-time.
Any other questions for Will? Great, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so kind of teed him right up. We'll go right into Ray and the middle school.
Ray Grogan, Freeport Middle School. Will, I think, did answer a lot, because we do have a lot similar in our requests and what we did last year. But I'll quickly just go over what we did last year. The RTI Ed Tech that's listed there is not a guest ghost, or what's the floating? What's that? The exact words?
Lost in transit.
Floating sub. Floating guest teacher. It is not that. It is what we call a bench sub, but which in translation may be the same thing.
It's interesting because the visual of those two things is very different in my mind.
And the same for Will. Every single day that position has been used. In September, it was absolutely necessary because we were down so many ed techs in our life skills program that person really spent the first 5 or 6 weeks in the life skills program supporting those students until we got that program fully hired, and then was in classrooms, and now most recently has been supporting our choices classroom where we're down in ed tech as well. So it's really that continuity of knowing the kids and being able to do anything has been huge for our school. We did also add 2 leadership positions, similar to what Will said. Really adding more people to our leadership team to get more voice in there, allows more groups of, for professional learning to happen during the day, which allows us to have different schedules for people to meet at different times for that to take place. So that's been a great advantage. And the drama technical director, we do 2 drama performances if enough kids come out for it. And the last 4 years we've had enough kids, and this year once again we had enough kids, but we only had 1 technical director in the budget, and now we added a second one for the second play for that. So that is how last year's money has been spent, which has all been very beneficial to the middle school. And then for next year's budget, what we're asking for is a half-time social worker. Right now, we do have that half-time social worker that does support our non-special ed students. We have a social worker that is fully, her days are full with all special ed students that have social work as part of their IEP, but we really needed more support for students that were not on an IEP that could not access her services. She is right now is a half-time. The person that's in the position currently is half-time at Pound on half-time with us, and that sharing has worked out really well. And to just add a little more, Colin, to your question is, like an example, like, seeing the kids, it's great in that, but what's the real benefit is in real time when there's something going on. Monday morning, when there was an issue over the weekend that a child really needed to process before they could go to class, that's the time she can sit down, get them to class, and she's going to do a heck of a lot better than coming to my office and me getting them back to class. So that real time, having them available, and especially like when we're sharing within the district, if something's going on at one school and you need to stay longer, there's that flexibility as well with it. So it's really nice. Because it is harder, to find the outside counselors that the families need to get, especially if they don't have insurance. And it's also that tiered, because we'll start with the guidance counselor. We'll then, if they need more, go to the social worker. If they need more, then, the parents will refer on their outside. So it's been a huge addition to our school to have this here for this year. So that is our only ask.
So it doesn't sound like you're willing to share with Will because you're already sharing with Pownell.
Exactly.
Okay. It's a good idea. Beth.
I just have a question of so you feel like the halftime social worker is enough? Do you feel like this halftime position is meeting the need that you have?
I think it was easy to fill the schedule. I think that right now we're pulling in some outside agencies to help cover that. Right now we're able to cover what we need to, but I'm not saying you won't hear from me again at some point in time if it didn't, because before we were able to fill this need completely with outside agencies and that, and we just can't do it. There aren't enough people to do that. You may see me again down the road asking for that, but right now we feel like this is where we need to be.
Thank you.
So this is really just taking an existing position that was previously funded with COVID funds and moving it to the local budget?
Yes.
Okay. Whereas for Durham, it's a new position altogether. They didn't have one funded through COVID.
Yeah.
Okay. Colin.
Yeah, I guess I would follow up on Beth's question, because I guess I'm trying to because I think the benefit of what you have currently is clear, but in terms of the data that we're looking at from the MIHAS survey, both for middle and high school, I went back and I have it with me, but I couldn't find it. But it just in terms of it seems like those things that we're pulling out there in terms of the 29.3% felt sad for 2 weeks or more, right? Yeah. Those are sort of, if not huge increases, are concerning increases. So I guess I would just, echo Beth's question of if we're indeed trying to recognize that there are some newly recognized problems that are again also a year old because we're working with year-old data. Is that 0.5?
So we did not have the social worker in place last year. This is the first year of having that social worker in place. So that data is when we did not have a social worker in place. To answer the question, I think where you and Beth are going is an in-house social worker is better than pulling in from an outside agency, because we control their schedule. We kind of, we don't have to deal with insurance. We don't have to deal with that. So that is better. But the overall goal is getting all kids served in all kids services. So it's that balance. All right, this can go here, this can go here, and cover that. But I don't think there is a doubt that it's better to have, under our own supervision with that. But right now, the kids that are needing social work, we are able to get it for them. Yeah.
Just one piece I'd add to that. You might recall when we talked about the MIAS data that we always merge the middle school data, because by the time we usually get it as a district, there are 9th and 10th graders, and we want to see them as a whole. But in that number, it was a more significant increase in Durham than it was in Freeport. So that when that number goes up, it's because we were pulling it up. It had gone up in Freeport also, but not quite as dramatically. So that was another part of why we had sort of prioritized that piece.
So it seems like that's super helpful. Thank you for that clarification. So it seems that next year when we look at the MIHAS data, we're going to be taking into consideration the fact that you at least had the 0.5 this
school
year,
yeah.
And that will be sort of part of the puzzle of saying, all right, how are we starting to see a shift in those numbers because of that, the presence of that? And we wouldn't be able to do that until the following year for Durham.
And that MIAS data is a lot of what kind of drove the social workers, drove the health teachers, and so we definitely that's a really good piece of data that we do use to help drive what we're doing.
And it's every 2 years they do it, right?
Odd years.
Yeah, it's in the odd years. So what we just saw was 21. Yeah.
The years got a little confusing through COVID.
With COVID,
they
did
didn't
they?
do it because we are actually doing it right now,
Because it's
but
23.
they're super slow on getting it back to us. So we're getting ready to do that with our students right now. I think the high school just did theirs last week.
Durham did theirs already, I think.
Durham did theirs, yeah.
Yeah.
And ours is,
But we don't get it till next year.
yes.
Okay. So this will be the one time we actually got information 2 years in a row, but really
Yes.
because the ones we just got is really a year old already.
Yeah.
So, okay. Maddie.
Sort of going with this thread of wondering if we're asking for enough and we're doing enough. I think your answers are helpful so far, but this might actually be for Jen, and I know she's coming next, but do we currently have just a 0.5 at the high school, or do we currently have 2.5 at the high school social workers, and then the request is for an additional 0.5? No?
Come on up, Jen.
Sorry. Well, because I just, for content, I'm wondering, do we have more at the high school and we're just trying to catch up at, I'm wondering strategically if it makes more sense to have more support in middle school and then keep it consistent in high school. And I'm just wondering if we're catching kids a little too late in the process by having more support by the time they get to high school. I'm just wondering if we should put more of our eggs in the middle school basket or have it a consistent level.
If I could just add something to that, the ask for the middle school and the ask for the high school are positions we already have. They're not, but they're being funded through the ESSER money, and that money's going away. So if the money goes away, those half-time positions go away. But for Durham, it is a new ask that was not funded previously through COVID money or through the local budget.
So am I correct in remembering that there are 2.5 social workers at the high school currently?
I'm gonna ask.
I think that includes the
two. So the
2.5 people.
two total people,
Total.
including the special ed social worker, right? So I don't know if it's 1.5 for the special ed and 0.5 for the rest of the kids, or 1 and 1, but I'm sure Jen will tell us. It's 1 and 1. Okay. So there's 1 for 4 grades. It's actually, if you did the math, we're actually, I guess it's not really fair to say, because if the Durham one is supporting all grades and not just the middle school grades, is that right? Would it be focused in the middle school grades, the supports?
No.
Not necessarily.
The health, yes. The health teacher, yes. The social worker, not necessarily.
Not necessarily, because I was going to say, if it were focused in the middle school grade, then we would essentially have, for our 7th and 8th graders, 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, we would have 1 full-time position between Durham and Freeport Middle, whereas at the high school for 4 grades, we have 1 full-time position. So per student, it would be a higher ratio or a lower ratio of students to the person. But it's kind of hard to say because of the different age groups that are covered between the schools.
Can I add something else?
Sure can.
Yeah, don't worry, we're not going to have a floating social worker. Just the other piece to put out there, Maddie, is that it's not just, I mean, I know you know this, but I just want to reiterate it to everybody, is that the efforts aren't solely focused around a social worker who's supporting a small group of children. So it's across every facet of the day. And you hear that all the time with Responsive Classroom. This coming summer, there's a Responsive Classroom training for middle level teachers. We're constantly working and refining our advisory programs collectively. We're looking at the different structures and experiences kids have during their day collectively. We have teachers working hard. Paige Fournier, we added in across the 2 middle schools last year, for this current year, I beg your pardon, as a sort of instructional coach. And she's very much focused on supporting teachers with supporting kids. So there's a lot that we're doing across the whole fabric of the day and the fabric of the whole middle school experience. This is just one facet of it. And so we definitely are focused on being proactive in sort of really supporting early adolescence in that sort of transition. And that's everything from what academic support looks like, emotional support looks like, and then sort of peer connections, social connections, and really trying to re-bolster those because that was took a big hit at an age when those social connections are most pivotal. So it's not that one piece. We're definitely proactive across.
Thanks. That is helpful. I think I'm just thinking, when we've wanted to support math, for example, we've sort of eked it along, the 0.2 and then a 0.5, as we sort of figure out what the needs are over a number of years. And it feels like we're in this situation where we've got this old data and we know, like, yikes, we're in trouble. And of course, I know you all are working very holistically. I think I just wanted to ask the question specifically around these asks, and appreciate your responses.
And the one nice thing about having the social work at school is parents are very receptive to it because it takes place during the school day and it doesn't impact them trying to figure out with their schedule outside of the school day and that. So it really does, and it can focus on the specific school-related issues and how those issues impact school. So it is a really important part of what, to support students.
All right. Thank you. So we will move on to Principal Golko and Freeport High School.
Good evening, everybody. So I'll start with just briefly talking about our requests from last year, which were a 0.5 ed tech and a jazz band stipend. I think the jazz band stipend helps us to get more students involved, have a standing regular meeting for the jazz band, and anytime that we can expand our co-curricular opportunities for kids has been great. So the 0.5 ed tech has really helped us. We have been able to have a full-time ed tech who's dedicated to our ELL students, and that has been incredibly valuable. This ed tech travels around to mainstream classes with the students so that they are able to be in mainstream classes for the vast majority of the day. They are only in an ELL class for one period a day, and then they're mainstreamed for the rest of the classes. So we've been incredibly fortunate to increase our support through the EdTech role for this year. For the coming year, I think we've heard a lot tonight about the social worker position. So we are incredibly fortunate. We have 2 full-time social workers. One is dedicated to regular ed students. The other is dedicated to special education students, but also sees regular ed students. Our social workers are incredibly busy. Somebody made the comment at the staff meeting today that I don't know that they stop to take a break at any point during the day, but we have been very fortunate to have that support, and we are hoping through the ESSER funds, and we are hoping that the school budget would be able to support that so that we are able to continue with 2 full-time social workers. Maybe just a point of clarification is that we have an outside counselor, Linda Tiffany, who comes to school 3 times a week, who started with 1 day, went to 2 days, 3 days. She is an LCSW and her background is in substance abuse. And so she has been full also for those 3 days that she is working with us at school. But she is not a district employee. She's an outside consultant. So that's an additional support that our students access during the day. She does see some students privately outside of school as well. So she's made good connections with people here at Freeport. So that is our major request. I did want to, if you see kind of the end of my proposal is just a couple of major things that point out this year. The biggest one is that we're not totally clear on how this happened, but there was an error in the budget last year, and just under $9,000 was omitted for the SAT exam. So that was requested in my budget and didn't make it into the budget. And so this year it looks like that is an increase where that was requested last year. So that came from the state used to pay when it was our state test for the SAT. We felt that it was really important to be able to eliminate the financial barrier for kids because the SAT is still required for so many schools. And that looks like an increase when that was something that was approved by the board and then didn't make it into the budget. And we also do the same thing that we pay for the PSAT exam for our students, for our 10th graders. And 11th grade students are able to take the PSAT. They pay for that themselves. So basically we pay for 1 10th grade exam for all students, 1 11th grade exam for all students. The Plato Ed Options online support is something new. We've used the Plato program for many years. That's our online credit recovery program that we use during the summertime. We do it during the year for credit recovery. And we also sometimes have a select group of students who use Play-Doh for courses that we don't offer that they're interested in here. And so they have started a new program here that's called Adoptions Academy, which actually links the students who are doing the online program to a live teacher. So it's not all the time. It's not like virtual high school where you have somebody that's right there. But for example, during summer school, chemistry is one of the hardest courses that kids take online. There's not always a science or chemistry teacher who's there. We try to prioritize having an English and math teacher there. And so these students would be able to have an actual teacher that they can reach out to and set individual appointments for. So we think that it's brand new. We're testing it a little bit this year, and we're hoping that can be something that is really successful for our summer school students. And then the choreographer position has been something that we've considered. I did, Maddie saw your email just now. And so we have, that hasn't been formally brought as a part of my budget. There has been other requests that the Visual and Performing Arts Department has decided to prioritize in years past. This year, this has risen to the top. The boosters have provided financial support for that in the past. And we are hoping that this could become a part of the budget, as choreography is an important part of our fall musical and serves a large number of students. Maddie had asked about how many students. Depends on the show, but with cast and crew, it can be between 40 to 75 kids that are involved in a show just for the fall show. And the fall show runs from August to the show is in mid-November. And then one thing we are trying to be super conscious of is paper. The cost of paper is in all of these things that we're seeing rising costs. Just to give you a quick snapshot of that, last year's budget, we budgeted for $28 a case. So it was about $5,600 that we budgeted for paper. This year it's going to be, we're guesstimating that it's $60 a case. So that goes up to $12,000 that we would need for paper. So we are really trying to be mindful of paper, but there's times when we need it. So that is something that you might see as a striking increase in our budget at the high school. But we are trying to be earth savvy and not print as much as maybe some kids would like to. And that's it for my request.
Earth savvy and cost savvy. You guys will be happy to know that at the Finance Committee this evening, we discussed, you guys may recall that every time there's an update to the budget, which is almost every week or every other week during this period, and we provide updated information, we will not be providing the full, line by line, this guy, however many pages this guy is, every time. So we'll do one now. You have one now. We'll do it at the end. They'll all be posted, so you'll have access to them if you so choose. But this 56-page document will not be printed for each board meeting. So we're doing our part. Maddie,
But is available on request by the public as well, if need be.
right?
I just wanted to thank you for bringing the choreographer up this time, just having been on the Performing Arts Boosters. I know that's been a request for a long time, and just for anyone out there who doesn't know this, the fall musical is basically the fall sport for a big chunk of kids, and it's just a really critical part of their belonging in school, and I'm excited that this is in the budget.
I love that it's always a musical, because that seems to be getting more and more rare, the musical. So, Beth.
I'll echo that as well. I was very excited to see that in there. I just had a question around, it seems like it's at a stipend amount, this $12.72, but there isn't an official stipend for that yet. Is there a plan to either request a stipend, or how you're going to is it going to be, funded going forward too?
That would be the plan would be to request a stipend.
Okay, awesome. And I have one other question around, with the counselor, and you were saying that outside counselor who comes in 3 days a week has some substance abuse, substance training or whatever to help. But have you considered having a substance abuse counselor at this school? Because I know that there are, high schools around us that have them, and I know how hard, everybody here is working, and we obviously know that there's, the drugs in the school too. So I'm just wondering if you had considered that at all.
It's something that we've talked about in the past. I mean, that was part of the reason of increasing Linda Tiffany's availability at the high school. I think that we have seen from our data that anxiety is the number one thing that we are battling right now. And I think those things are closely tied. And a chicken or the egg? Are students using substances because of their anxiety, or are they using, in the other reverse direction? And so it's certainly something that we have considered. I think right now in my time, in my 8 years here, we've gone from 1 to 1.5 to 2 people, which I think we've been incredibly grateful for that. And so it's not to say that we wouldn't consider having a substance abuse counselor. I think that, as I said, we have 2 full-time social workers who are full all the time. And so it's just something we're seeing an increased need in different areas. But the data is definitely that the faculty looked at some data today of some of the things that kids are self-identifying as their challenges, and anxiety soars to the top.
Thank you.
Kara.
The live teacher being in quotes, I think you answered that question for me, that they're not there while they're taking a class, but they're available to schedule an appointment. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. There's some elements. So right now we have some students who are language students who are using the online option, and they are able to set up appointments, or we schedule a standard time when they come in. We've never used this before for summer school, and so we'd have to see what that looks like at the time frames of when they come. But at a minimum, and kids prefer this, they're able to chat with them and do that digital conversation saying, I need help with such and such a unit or an assessment, and then they are hopefully going to quickly get response from that person.
Okay, so there is live chatting option.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So on that language question, we've continued to post for that Latin teacher.
Mm-hmm.
Still no luck?
No luck.
Because I heard the online was a bit of a struggle this year.
Challenging.
Yes. Okay. That's what I heard.
I can talk about that in program studies. I'm coming back up.
We're gonna give Jen a quick break. Oh no, we're not. Colin.
Thanks, Jen. I just forgive me for passing notes in class, but I did slide a note to our friend Tegan, because I felt like given the conversation we've been having around the importance of the social worker positions and the counseling, I asked her in this note if she would be willing to speak just a little bit to what the students might experience in terms of how much they feel that if they are having trouble with anxiety or need to speak with somebody, how easy it is to talk with somebody. So Tegan, would you care to answer that?
I've never been one to personally reach out to the school, so I'm not really super aware of my options. I know the guidance counselor, but what I've found, and when I talk to my peers or other students, that scheduling appointments with our guidance counselor is, it's not really something you can just walk in on a bad day and be like, I'm feeling anxious. You have to schedule it weeks ahead. And sometimes the only open meetings that the guidance counselor has is during class, and some of our teachers don't let us go during class. So I'm not sure what the other options are besides the guidance counselor, but when it comes to that, it is difficult to just schedule a meeting because it's hard to time anxiety. Mm-hmm. So, if only we could, right? But I'm sure there's other stuff that I'm not aware of, like other help.
But it's an interesting perspective that, and maybe kids who are really in need of it know what's available to them. But it sounds like they're already, their time is full. But maybe we need to do a better job of making sure our kids know, if you're struggling, this is an opportunity, outside of the guidance counselor, right? Because I think that's kind of your default thought, I think, for high school is like, oh, you talk to your guidance counselor. But if, obviously it sounds like they're obviously very busy doing a lot of variety of things as well. So making sure that they know, hey, if you can't get into a guidance counselor, you might reach out here. I don't know.
Yeah, so one of the things that we provided for all of the students in all 4 grades is there are these, just like one small thing that we've done, that they all have these small cards that say need to talk. And so the guidance counselors are very busy, but there are a lot of students who are walking in, especially if they are in the midst of crisis. And so when students are struggling, they know that our standard response is that there's 4 places for them to go, which is social worker, nurse, guidance, main office, because there's never a time when the main office is closed unless there's an emergency. So from 7 to 3:30, there's never a time that door is shut. And so kids have these small cards that say need to talk, that have all the support resources in the school on one side and then all of the state and national crisis lines on the other. But one of our teachers had the brilliant idea of, we made them all in an assembly take a photo of that card because we knew they were going to lose that card. And then I was like, hopefully, Tegan, you have that photo in your phone. And then I told the kids to make a separate folder, kind of like people have done with their COVID cards. So there's just a folder in their phone for that one photo. And then we have posters blown up of those need to talk resources and names. The problem is getting students. That's one of the things that we're going to work on with the JED Foundation is help-seeking behavior. It's one thing to know where to go, and it's another thing to take that step and go. And that's what we are seeing. Not as many kids as we would want them to are using that help-seeking behavior. And also the Student Leadership Committee, I've shared with the board that there's 3 subcommittees. There's microaggression policies and procedures, and one is mental health. And so they are running the same sort of discussions that they did last year with Cortico and recording them and coding the data. That's coming next week. And they are trying to get information from students about, do they know what our resources are? Do they know how to access them? And if they aren't accessing them, why not? So that's a big piece of what we're working on.
Jen, I just want to say that's super helpful context for the importance of this continuing having this 0.5 position, and also how that will integrate with the conversation you're having with the JED Foundation. So thank you for that, and also thank you, Tegan, for that perspective. Really, really appreciate it.
She's gonna be flipping through her pictures later. Like, did I take that picture?
Yeah, I'm just curious to know, from your perspective, how easy do you think it would be for a student who is having a crisis of some kind to find somebody, one of those 4 people, to speak with them in the moment that they have, instead of making an appointment 2 weeks down the road or whenever Tegan is thinking the guidance counselor might be able to schedule something?
So can they find someone? Yes. Charlie and I have radios at all times. So if a student is in crisis, and even if they don't want to talk to us, we find them a space and we find them an adult. But can they find the person in that moment that they want to speak to? If they want to speak to one of our 2 social workers, and that's the only person who they feel comfortable talking with, it depends on the day. So we've had stretches of time when things are a little bit calmer. We've had, I'm sure everyone knows this, kind of coming off of winter break, going into midterms, and then we went snow day, delay, with midterms in the middle. This has been a challenging time for us to just get some momentum right now where students are very thrown off. So our social workers and our guidance counselors have been really busy in the last week and a half, 2 weeks. So it really kind of depends on the situation. But if a student is in crisis, then we have a space to go. We make sure that someone is checking in with them. And the guidance counselors and social workers know that if they are in a session with someone and I knock on the door, that means that someone is in crisis, and they'll make the decision in that moment. Is it someone they have a weekly appointment with who they can say, I need you to just wait here and I'm going to come back, or I need to see you next week? Or they are with someone else who's in crisis and they can't leave in that moment. So there isn't a kind of a standard response, but I think that it depends on the moment, and it depends on who the student is comfortable talking with. Some students are comfortable with any of us. They share lots of information with me, and I say to them, I'm not a trained counselor, but I'm here to listen. And other students have an adult in this building who's the only one that they want to speak to.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to kind of ask that question in terms of whether the social worker we're asking for is actually going to meet our needs, you know, at this level too. So,
Maddie.
Just in the context of this conversation, I want to thank you for what you said about encouraging help-seeking behavior among the students. And I know that, you know, we've focused a lot in the last couple of years, year and a half, on student voice. And you've taken that a long way in the high school with a leadership team, with flexes in advisory. And then there are existing clubs. Like sometimes we forget about like RSVP, and you know, even clubs that may not seem related, but you know, those are strong relationships are built between staff who have those stipends and run those clubs. Like I think sometimes we look at clubs and stipends and we think, oh, these are the fun things that students do, but this is where culture is built. This is where they find other students they feel comfortable with and greater exposure to the staff as well. And I think I just wanted to say that, to say some of the things we don't look at are really helpful for the students as well, and we should not overlook those little stipends. They're important.
Thank you, Jen. All right, so we will move on to athletics and Craig Sickles.
Well, good evening. My name is Mr. Sickles, Craig Sickles. The two focus areas of maintaining class size and student support, I think my three asks fit those right to a T. I'll go over the coaching positions first. This last fall, fall of 22, we had 14 golfers with no seniors. So we expect all 14 to come back. Maybe some other upperclassmen may join, and of course any incoming freshmen. This last fall we did have 6 JV matches that was coached by the varsity coach, and while he was coaching the JVs in the JV match, the varsity, the rest of the kids did not have a formal practice. Only 6 kids can play in a match, and at the varsity level it's the 6 kids with the lowest score. So having an opportunity for some JV play certainly helps the program grow. So we're asking for a JV coach, and I think, you know, even with 14 or more, it's very difficult for one coach to supervise. He'll have some of them on the driving range, and some of them will be spread out over 19 holes. So at least with a second pair of eyes, they'll have more supervision, they'll have more coaching, and I think that's the same thing as a class size in the classroom. Any questions on JV golf?
Thought high schoolers weren't allowed in the 19th hole.
No. Actually, there's only 9. First team baseball. In the spring of, let me get this right. In the last spring of 22, we had 24 7th graders come out for baseball, in addition to 18 or so on the 8th grade team. So we made 2 7th grade teams. Those 7th graders are going to be in 8th grade this fall. The gentleman who coached the 7th grade team will be coaching the 8th grade team, and he's also very involved with the Little League program. We have 45 high school players returning this spring, and only 4 of them are seniors. So looking ahead to the spring of 24, you take the 40 returning high school kids and the 24 8th grade, and you've got over 60. That means that if they all come out and play, we will be cutting 20 students. Now, this isn't set in stone yet. The 8th grade coach who coached them in 7th grade last year, he doesn't think that all 24 are going to come back out. We're doing sign-ups now in February for baseball. So I don't know how accurate that sign-up is going to be when we're having the coldest weather we've had so far, and we're asking them to think ahead about baseball. So this first team is only going to happen if we have enough players to fill the team. And it's a balancing act. I mean, we can ask them, but those who sign up and those who show up sometimes are two different numbers. We don't even do sign-ups here at the high school because of that. We just tell them the first day of practice is here, and they show up. In the superintendent's documents, she had a figure of 3,600. That is for the stipends only. In the budget that was presented, there's an additional 700 for additional bats, game practice balls, batting helmets, and catcher's gear. So it does come to 45. The 7 is already in the athletic budget that was presented. Any questions on first team baseball? Oh, and I might add, so if you go back to the first page, these two stipends are offset with the elimination of Freeport High School's girls' first team basketball. We have not had a first team girls basketball team for 7 or 8 years. And even if every girl in the 8th grade who's playing basketball now comes out and plays next year, which never happens, we still won't have enough to field the first team basketball team. At Freeport Middle School and Durham Community School, we haven't fielded a cheering team for, 6 or 7 years. Ray? Will? It's been a long time. So the elimination of those 3 positions is offset with the addition of the 2 other stipends.
Could I ask the 24 8th graders, because right now Freeport Middle and Durham have separate baseball teams, right? Does that include both teams? That 24 is Durham and...
No, that's just Freeport Middle School.
And how many play in Durham?
The number of 8th graders, I don't exactly know.
So it's even more.
So there could be even more, you're right.
Right. So it's even...
Yeah. We'll have a lot of baseball. And that's a product of, we've been to 4 state championships in 5 or 6 years.
Okay.
I'm curious why we haven't explored cheering in the middle schools. We've had some champion cheer squads.
We were conference champions 1 year, 2018 or 2019, I think. Excuse me, I got something in my throat. We offer it at Durham. They actually tried to do, instead of calling it cheering 1 year, they tried to call it dance, and they're not coming out.
I think we've struggled even at the high school, right? I mean,
Yeah.
we've tried to join with other towns, and we can't even get enough for that. I think the rise of kind of club cheering with like the Firehouse and these different sort of groups that do it at a really high level, I'm not sure if all those kids are also doing it in high school. So I think people who are really interested in it, where the only option used to be high school, now they have other outlets. I don't know, pure speculation, but...
Yeah, 2 years ago, I came before you, and Mount Ararat, Brunswick, and Freeport were going to do a 3-way cooperative team because the 3 of us didn't really have enough. We had 3 or 4 girls, maybe 5, but 5 does not make a real cheering team. And even with the 3 schools, it didn't work. We tried it again this year, which is the 2nd year of the co-op. And Mount Ararat had 0 girls. Brunswick had 3 or 4 that were going to cheer at home game only. We started out with 6 or 7, and they were going to cheer for games only, but that kind of fell by the wayside, and now they're not doing anything. So, that might be a very good reason why, and but that's where we are with cheering.
Just want to mention. Oh, sorry. Cheering is a gender neutral sport. We've had boys and girls on our cheer squad.
Any other question? Oh.
Sorry, this is just a math confusion. If we haven't fielded a first team girls basketball team in 8 years, and we haven't had a cheering team in 6 or 7 years, and yet we're counting that as sort of that stipend being sort of off, like the elimination of that stipend offsetting the new stipend, we haven't been spending that stipend for the last 6
But
to
they
8
were in the
years.
budget.
But
Like
they were
we
in the
could have
budget.
one.
Right.
So it ended up rolling into undesignated fund balance
Right.
from things we didn't use. But
Okay.
from a budgeting perspective, it's sort of previously they were in there.
We're just
this year they're
swapping
coming
them.
out and being replaced with a first team baseball stipend.
So we couldn't count on those funds going into the
Right.
additional funds.
Yeah, exactly.
Same way we could. Okay.
Moving on to the trainer. I didn't think about passing these out until tonight when I realized there was going to be new members on the board. I just got to get the right ones. So this is the exact same thing I passed out last year. So the vested folks, you've already seen this, but should I do one for all?
No, that's okay. They'll be all right. Ginny will put it all online, so.
So
Yeah.
I won't go over this, but if there's any people who were here last year, and of course the new folks, you might want to say, the new folks may want to say a few questions before I kind of explain where we are and how we got here. So for several years, I think as many as 10, we've been contracting our athletic training services with Coastal Orthopedic in Brunswick. In 21-22, that figure was $25,000, and it had been $25,000 for at least 5 or 6 years with no increase. What that got us was game coverage for every home game. When there weren't games, the trainer was here at school for 2 hours. 2 hours is not nearly enough time to follow up with all the injuries on all of our teams when one of them practices off campus and soccer practice doesn't start until 7:15 at night and there's another soccer practice at 2:45. So the follow-up with injury care and rehabilitation and the amount of communication with the student, with the parent, with the medical profession was difficult to do on days when we didn't have games. Between seasons, when we didn't have games, that $25,000 got us 2 hours a day, 4 days a week for speed and agility clinics after school, along with the weight room that's open that we have stipends for. And again, that 2 hours was used by him to follow up with any injuries or concussions, return to play protocols. And again, all the students that got injured in the previous year are now trying to get ready for the next season, and 2 hours a day just wasn't doing it. Last year I came to you folks and we increased 25,000 to 47.5 I think, and what that got us was game coverage. When there were no games, he was still here for the entire afternoon. So now that follow-up, that rehabilitation, the reassessment, communication with parents, the school nurse, the doctors, I think happened in a more readily, and he was more readily available. Between seasons, we increased that from 2 hours a day to 4. Again, it was more than 2, but still, I think a lot more could have happened there. So when we increased it to 47.5, Coastal Orthopedic advertised, and they got one applicant who was offered the job, and about a week and a half before preseason started, she took another job somewhere else, and they were unable to fill that position. as the previous year, our trainer left right after the basketball. So we've been without a trainer for 1 and almost a half year. What Coastal Orthopedic has been doing is sending per diems. These are people who are trainers somewhere else and they have a free day, or they want to moonlight and they make extra money. This winter and fall, we've had 5 different people who come on game day only. So our kids don't know the trainer doesn't know our kids. There's a level of, trust and confidence that goes both ways. And when we don't have a game, there is nothing. There's no follow-up. There's no communication. We've had 16 concussions so far this year in athletics. The reason that they didn't get any applicants is because when they don't work for us here at the school, they're in the clinic. And what they do in the clinic is entry-level stuff like answering phones and scheduling appointments. A position that's contracted is more likely to be applied for with the least amount of time in a clinic. What a school employed position offers is no clinic time, and they don't want clinic time. And I've already been told by 2 of our per diem people that if we advertise a school employee full-time trainer, that they are going to apply. The other thing I've done, and I just finished this today to give you a look at what it might look like. This is a job description that I've cobbled together from 4 or 5 other schools that I think fits our situation. And then a look at what their day might look like when they're in season, what we do right now when it's in season, and what they might do between seasons. If you look at the job description, all of the items in black are what we currently would get. All the items in red are what would be added. If you go to 1, 2, 3, for the 4th page, where it says current contracted athletic trainers schedule, Monday through Friday. The day starts at 2:15 and ends anywhere from 7:30 to 8 to 8:30. The time between 2:30 and 4 is pretty flexible. If we have if a game doesn't start until 4, he may stay in the training room longer. He might not have anybody in the training room and may go out to the field sooner. But between 2:30 and 4, that's kind of a flex time that he does, or she does what and wherever it's needed, whether it's people coming to the training room to see them, or they going out to the fields to follow up on an injury from a previous game or previous day. If you look at the proposed weekly schedule, the day starts at 12 noon, and all that red is stuff that currently really isn't being done. And then from 2:30 on, it's pretty much the same. The last page is what a day might look like in between a season when there are no practices and games. It will be a 9 to 5 job.
Are you ready for questions?
I am. Hit me.
Kara.
Can you clarify what classroom instruction they would be assisting with?
Health, phys ed, substitute teaching.
Beth. Oh, sorry.
Actually,
Oh, sorry.
I think we would need to be careful how many times we have them sub, because then it takes away from all the other things that that are there. But I think, shortage of subs, shortage of bus drivers, coaches, officials, there's shortages of everything.
Okay, so we did add the 27,310 last year, correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right, just because there wasn't anything in that, so I just wanted to go back and double check that we had done the hours because I wasn't sure about that. And so the 42.5 that you're asking for is in addition to the 47.5 that we already have built up. Is that correct? Okay. And so I know that there was some concern last year about who would sort of oversee the trainer, and that we really like the idea of a trainer sort of having some medical, doctor sort of, I don't know what to call it, I guess. Supervision, thank you. Some sort of thing being when we contracted with them. So obviously this person, what sort of oversight would they have?
Well, so I did talk to the school nurse about that. If you look on the first page, it says reports to, and it's to the athletic administrator. I asked her if she wanted me to add her name, and she said, well, you can add works very closely with. But I think that's the school employee too, with a higher level of medical expertise and knowledge. Certainly, the two of us, I think could balance that out.
Okay, and I just had another question. I'm just looking at it very quickly because you just gave it to us, but it seems to me that what you have listed under the proposed weekly schedule from 12 to 2:30 on this second to last page is basically the same thing that person would be doing from 9 a.m. to 2:30 on the off season.
Correct.
So how can we justify that they are only doing it for 2 hours during that time, but then we're doing 6 hours of the same exact thing?
Yeah, they're not going to get that all in 2 hours.
And the between seasons is really only 2 weeks between fall and winter, and 2 weeks between winter and spring. It's not a long period, right? Is that?
Well, it depends on how far our teams go in the playoffs.
Well, obviously they're going all the way, so.
It could be as little as 2 and as much as 4.
Okay.
Depending on when teams get done. The JV and first team, their seasons end, but the varsity continues. Some of the things that this adds is working with the middle school nurses on injuries and return to play protocols during the school day. They can't work with the nurses at the end of the school day because they go. So, having that time in school to help them, those types of things is very beneficial.
Maddie.
Thanks, Craig. Given the conversation that we just had about social workers and needs at the high school, we talked about, somebody asked a question about, Beth did, I think, about substance abuse counselors. So that bullet that you have, the third bullet on the second to last page and the last page about assisting the nurse with substance abuse counseling, could you just talk a little bit more about what that might look like?
I think it's another person who the kids can contact with. The last trainer we had here was by far the best one we had. He was here for 2.5 years. And the kids really liked him. I think there was a level of trust. And so I think bringing in a medical type person who the kids know in a different arena and working with the substance abuse, the social workers, the nurse, he could be a very valuable asset with that.
And would that person come with that kind of training in their background always, or would that be something special we would need to look to hire for?
I'm not sure if I can answer that question. I don't know as I know. I think just the medical piece of what substances do to the body, whether you're an athlete or not. And again, he's probably going to be only called in for kids that he knows. Someone who doesn't know who he is not going to want him involved in a conversation with a social worker or a guidance counselor or the school nurse.
That said, if they're part of the staff, they're part of the culture at the school, they might come to be known, by a wider array of kids.
Yep, absolutely. And just being in the building too. You know, it's like a coach. You know, you have coaches in the building. I mean, we have great coaches that don't teach, but that added piece of being in the building, being seen, and being able to walk down the hall, put your arm around a kid and said, "Hey, great game last night," or, you know, that's just huge.
So would he be sort of a floating coach, like we were talking about?
It's a whole new team. So essentially we're looking at a $90,000 position here, right?
60,000 around, you know, on one of those pieces that are in colored. The first one that I passed out that I showed you last year, if you go to that, it's got green. It's this chart here. York High School in 2017 put everything in black together. They did the research. This is their document. In 2001, 2022, I expanded it to include Waynfleet and NYA. And these are the figures that they, in black, paid in 2017. I followed up, and the figures in green are what they were paying in 21, 22.
Okay. So the difference between them is similar to how we do teachers. It's the benefit portion.
Yeah.
So that's straight salary, but then there's also benefits associated with it.
And you can notice that Waynfleet and NYA, two private schools, are paying a lot less than the public schools.
And one of them has to teach gym class too.
Yeah, and she's no longer there because that's not what she wanted to do. So, you know, it's an entry-level position, and they're going to go wherever they can find the best position for them. And what they want to do is be an athletic trainer. They don't want to teach phys ed. That's not.
So you should probably not highlight the being a floating sub in your interview process. Other duties as assigned, that picks all those things up. Maura.
I'm going to be really disappointed now if there's not a floating holographic component to the staff thing next year. Thank you very much, Craig, for all this information. It's helpful to see the job description and the different cohorts and all those things. And I'm noticing the trend in the increases in participation in athletics. And forgive me if we probably talked about this last year, but the reason for asking for the athletic trainer now, as opposed to not just the past couple of years, but like over time, why have we not needed this position previously, but now we need it? Are we seeing increases in injuries or just increase in participation? Could you just speak to that a little bit?
Well, I think we always wanted a full-time trainer, but it the financial piece, the financial obligation, as someone said last year, going from 25 to 47 is an incremental increase instead of going from 25 to 90. And that if it didn't work, then we would revisit it. And in my mind, the 47.5 is not working. It's not attracting applicants because it's not what people want.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was worth a shot, right? Because we thought we could get sort of full-time coverage without sort of the full-time price, and you get what you pay for, I guess, is the example. When these folks all have the same skill sets and these are their opportunities out there. If we want to get someone who's really connected and embedded in our schools, then I think this is kind of the path to take, unfortunately. I was hoping last year's model was going to work. I really did. And it sounded like it would. We had multiple people offering to provide the services, but none of them were able to deliver. Because you actually went back to some of those other folks we had talked to and said, hey, can you do this now? And they didn't have any luck either.
Yeah,
right?
They had three. We had three different physical therapy, Saco Bay, Coastal Ortho, and who's the one out of Portland? Spectrum. And there wasn't any takers. Saco Bay thought they might have someone who was going to move here from out of state, but then the move never happened, and they couldn't come up with a body.
I just had another question back on the positions for the golf coach and the baseball coach. Could you speak to, Craig, our Title IX requirements? And I'm just wondering about giving equity of access to, maybe there's different girls' sports that we could offer that would draw more participation. I'm just wondering, under the law, like, what do we have requirements for? And I know we don't look at it in here, like it's not broken down by gender, like our participation numbers.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what you're asking. So golf is a co-ed sport, and of those 14, we had 5 or 6 girls. And so when you have a match, you take your best 6 scorers. And if they're girls, then you take girls and they tee off from the women's tee. And so there's not a boys golf team or a girls golf team at the state level. It's golf. When they go to the individual state champions, then they offer a girls individual state champion and a boys individual state champion.
Oh, okay. That's helpful.
Yeah. Several years ago, I'm guessing maybe as many as 15, we had a former student who was in college, and one of her classes were asking her to do a project, and she did it on Title IX. And they look at the number of locker rooms, the number of games, the scheduling of practices, the uniforms, you name it, and the boys and girls are supposed to be equal, or they don't have to be, but you have to have a plan to make them equal to some extent. And I haven't been able to find that in a couple of years because I wanted to bring it, but we came through with flying colors, and I think we're even better now because of the facilities that we have, as far as giving everybody an opportunity to play on fields, and the number of games are dictated by, the boys play 18 games, the girls play 18 games. They both have locker rooms.
Mm-hmm.
The coaches are paid the same.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's great. I don't doubt or question that, and I'm very supportive of this additional baseball coach, because I feel like if we have 20 kids getting cut, that's 20 kids that could be participating in activity they really want to be in. So I wouldn't want to take away that opportunity. I guess I'm just wondering if we're not then offering, I know no one's coming out for basketball, unfortunately, or at least not enough to field the team. A first team. Oh, is there? We have a team. Oh, we have it. Okay. I thought this was saying we didn't have a team at all.
No, so we have varsity, JV, and first team.
Oh, okay. So this is just the first team.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I feel like my 4'11" 8th grader is probably not going to be playing basketball next year at the high school. There's a couple taller ones, but she is playing in middle school, though. She's one of those who played in middle school but will not play in high school. Entertaining. Other questions for Craig? Thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right. Hopefully we gave Jen enough of a rest before she's back up again with the program of studies.
So speaking of paper, this is a large document that some of you have seen for the past few years, but there are updates from year to year, and so hopefully this gives you a lot of information about various elements of our school programming, our course offerings, all sorts of things. So tonight I don't go through the whole program of studies. What I do are the changes to the program of studies and anything that would significantly impact our course registration process. So one of the challenging things is just about the minute that I give you the final copy of the program of studies. Then there's revisions and additions. And so there's already been some updates from Region 10, and there is a course update as well that came in late from the Visual and Performing Arts Department. So I will focus on the letter and the changes, some of the significant changes for next year. And so I will try to be as accurate as I can with the page numbers. Most of them are accurate, but they might be slightly off. So I will start with, if you look on the letter that I prepared that's talking about the changes to the program, it says in your letter that on page 42, so it's in the math portion of our offerings, one of the things we are really excited to offer, we've talked about this for the past few years and have decided to try and offer it. Of course, every time that we offer a new class, it's dependent if it runs on student interest. But we are going to offer college prep statistics. Right now, all we have is AP statistics, and a non-AP statistics course is something that we think could really help students who are headed off to college and need to, a background in statistics before they're taking a college level statistics class. It's also going to be another SMCC dual enrollment course. So we're really excited about that. As you know, we already have quantitative reasoning in the math department for dual enrollment. We have English 12, English composition for dual enrollment, and there's some opportunities for dual enrollment at Region 10 as well. We have decided to make a change from AP Physics C to AP Physics 1. This is something that we actually did at the beginning of this year. It wasn't in the program of studies because it was a last minute change. If you look at our AP data, our students have historically struggled with the AP Physics C. That's a calculus based physics class. And the problem is that sometimes they are taking that class before they've taken calculus or simultaneously. And the two courses don't match in terms of the timing of when they're teaching concepts. And so that was a significant struggle for some of our students. So the AP Physics 1 is an algebra-based physics class. It's still incredibly rigorous. I'll say it's one of the, I think in students' minds, one of the harder courses that we offer. And that is something that we are offering right now and would like to continue to offer. We have removed the social studies elective. We have not run this in the past few years, so we are officially taking that out, which is contemporary global issues. Just a reminder to the board that all sophomores are now required to take modern world conflict. So there was some overlap in that. They used to take Western studies, which was for lack of a better term, it was like a Plato to NATO course. It was a huge range of the time frame of that's not my line. That's a Charlie Mellon line. And so that's a course that we no longer offer Western studies. We haven't in the past few years. And so the introduction of modern world conflict impacted contemporary global issues, and students, all ninth graders, take global studies. So that was something that we saw as time to evolve. We're really excited about this. A couple of years ago, the board supported us in starting a guitar class, and we also provide the guitars, so that's not a financial barrier for kids. And we have enough interest in that we would like to offer intermediate guitar. We also are hoping we're going to try this. Not sure, for those of you who've been on the board for quite some time, we used to have a dance class, and the only reason we don't have it is it was a lack of student interest. We were down to single digit numbers, very small, for lots of different reasons. And so we have a change in our VPA department staffing, and we'd like to try and offer dance again. We feel that there would be student interest in that class. And so we would offer that for at least one semester, dependent on course signups. There is one other visual and performing arts class that I'll pass around the description right now. So one of the things that we have talked about a lot is making sure that our performing arts classes, particularly in our music classes, have offerings for students who are not what we would call traditional musicians. They are not someone who started playing an instrument when they were younger, and we have always are paying attention to what our students want and how many students walk around with earbuds in. And we know they're interested in music. It's just what kind of music. Our music technology class has been very successful, where students use GarageBand to produce their own music. We have level 1 and level 2 of that. And so this would be another edition of a class, Sounds Through Time, an intro to music history and listening course. So it's not just a music history class. It's also studying the formation of songs and music, but doing it through history. It would be open to 9th through 12th grade. That's another thing that over the past few years, we have really tried to expand elective offerings to 9th graders. There are many offerings that we have in the school that are just for 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. So when we're looking at new electives, we're really trying to push for making sure that they're open to 9th graders. We have struggled with our intermediate piano signups, and so this may take the place of intermediate piano depending on numbers, or it could be a situation where we combine intro to piano and intermediate piano students in the same room, because so much of the piano class is done independently. It's done with headphones. And so we'll be looking at that based on course enrollment and students' registration, what they're interested in. But we're excited about this offering and feel that this would reach another type of student who hasn't traditionally signed up for a music course. Back to the letter, in the updated clubs and activities, we've added a chess club, and we are really excited to share that we have officially applied to be the first chapter in Maine for an Active Minds club. It's a mental health awareness club, and the students had to be the ones to submit the application. Adults are not allowed to submit it. And so we have a very small but very mighty group of students who are interested in this, and I shared a video with them that research has shown that just having the presence of an Active Minds chapter helps with those help-seeking behaviors in a school. And so Active Minds, we were connected to them through Kyle Cares, and they have awarded us a $1,500 slush fund. Excuse me, it's not $1,500, that's for the speaker. They have offered us, I think it's a $900 slush fund for the kids to get started if they want to do some events. And they also start us with a kickoff kit. So we get a large banner to hang up. It's really trying to kind of publicize the club and get as many student members as we can. And then at the back, we have that at a glance page. That's hopefully so families can quickly and students can quickly look at what we offer. Is it a year? Is it semester? And what type of credit it is awarded for that. And so there were some changes, any changes that were in the program of studies, then we reflect that in the at a glance pages. And then you don't have the updated copy. That's the online version of the changes that Region 10 has made to some of their course descriptions. So those changes were minor, but I wanted to share that there was a major change that Region 10 has just approved through their board on Monday night that we're very excited about. The 3 sending principals and the 2 directors of Region 10 met to talk about, at first it was a brainstorm, and then it came to fruition pretty quickly, of changing the structure of Region 10 so that students will go every other day instead of half a day every day. What that enables them to do is they'll have a larger chunk of time in their program. So for the CNA kids, when they're going out on clinicals, right now, one of the struggles is they go out, they're at their location for a short amount of time. They need to get back to Region 10, get on the bus and come back here. They're going to have a larger chunk of time. But also because Region 10 does not have a cafeteria, they don't have a cafeteria or the ability to serve lunch, the students will be returning here right before our second lunch. They'll eat lunch here, and then they are able to take a 5th class at Freeport. So they will be here for 8-9, block 8-9 at the end of the day. One of the challenges for some of the kids in choosing whether or not to enroll in Region 10 is that there's some classes that they would not be able to fit into their schedule because something like Latin 4 only runs one block at one period a day, and they love Latin and they choose Latin over Region 10. Now this opens up the schedule. It's not going to be a magic wand. It's not going to solve it for every student, but it's going to solve them for many. The other thing it enables us to do is put kids into more intervention classes, because kids who go to Region 10, when they have 4 blocks out of 8 dedicated to Region 10 and 4 at the high school. And so if they are taking social studies, math, ELA, and science, that's it. There is no room for electives. There's no room for intervention classes when we see that they need help. This addition of a 5th class allows them to take on classes that they are choosing to take, but also supports that we feel are really important. And a big piece of this decision is that moving them to every other day means, for the first time since I've been here, that Region 10 kids will be able to attend advisory every other day. So we think that will be they will be able to access callbacks. They'll access the things that we do. The program on Wednesday, the one that Tegan was talking about today, was we had representatives from 5 colleges and university come. It was Colby, Bowdoin, UMF, USM, and SMCC came to talk about mental health in college in their transition in their first year. And so the Region 10 kids, we recorded it, but it's not the same as being there, because the Region 10 kids were not able to be there with us. And so they'll be able to participate in programming like that. So this is a very recent update since it's hot off the press from Monday night. We haven't shared that with students or with our staff yet, because this just came through. And so there's scheduling implications to that, of course, but we feel that any cons that there were are far outweighed by the pros that what this will do for students.
I just want to say Region 10 couldn't say enough about working with all of you to make all that happen. They're very, very pleased.
Great. Thank you. I think they think my pace is a little fast sometimes. I was like, how about right now? No, but we're excited. We're excited for this opportunity for students. And those are the major updates. I don't know if there's questions.
Maddie.
That is such exciting news. Really, I talk about culture all the time. You know, I'm really interested in the culture at the high school, and this feels like it's going to make it a much more inclusive culture for all our students as well, and it's just huge. Thank you for sharing that with us. I'm excited about that. Couple other things. The music class, that's really exciting. I know we've had some FHS grads go into music after school, either in a college program or a different path. And there's some really interesting careers in music now that aren't sort of the traditional instrumental path. So that's super exciting. And then I just had a question on page 7, the school profile.
Mm-hmm.
Well, 2 things. The superintendent needs to be updated there.
Thank you.
And then I feel like someone in the community asked me about this. Under curriculum, that first sentence says that we're one of Maine's leaders in transitioning to proficiency-based curriculum. And I just wonder if that still feels like, does that still feel true? Because that's from several years back. I just wonder if that deserves a little wordsmithing.
Definitely.
Okay.
So there was a period of time where we did an extensive amount of research on our school profile and examined profiles from schools across the state to look at them. And I think it's definitely time for us to come back. And we've kept this format. We've kept a lot of it. One of the things that we did change was there was a kind of big description of the towns that were in here, and feedback from colleges was that wasn't necessary. But I think that this is some old language that needs to be revised. Yeah.
I just had a couple of things I noticed on the clubs page,
Mm-hmm.
which I wasn't sure that I'm wrong, but on the extracurricular, so that's page 78. Their drama club is listed, but then also one act play and the musical. And I mean, I'm not aware of there being a drama club. is there a drama club?
There has been in the past. And
Okay,
so
but
that's
separate
because
than those plays and-
separate because that was something that met during the day, during the advisory.
Oh, okay,
So that,
okay,
and
thank
so
you.
that has changed depending on the students who are involved. And there were some students who wanted to be tangentially involved in the drama club, but weren't able to be a part of the production. So they were still able. It's similar to, we have some other clubs that have an extensive amount of involvement outside of the school day, but there's still some kids that just want to participate during the school day.
Absolutely. That's great. I wasn't aware of that. So thank you. And then I was also wondering about the men's and women's ensemble, because I was told that those were eliminated in favor of trying to find something a little different. And I didn't see them listed I don't know if they were ever listed in the course book, but are they still in existence?
So that was not a course that
Right.
that was standalone, and so we haven't eliminated them forever. And so I think that that's something. Again, it's dependent on the students who are there and the interest of the kids. And so we've left them on here. Some of the clubs that are on this have waning participation, and so I would say waxing and waning. And so we try to leave them on here because our messaging to kids is that if there's something that they're interested in, then they're reaching out to find out about that. And if there's something that's not listed here, then they have the ability to start that. So, for example, the Ultimate Frisbee Club is one that we leave on here. It's some years we have it and it's super popular. Right now it is. Then we'll have 2 years where nobody wants to play. We still leave it on there so the kids see this is something you could do. And so that's where some of the changes come in for that list.
Right. And I guess it was just, hearing from the teacher that those were eliminated. So I was just curious about that. Thank you.
I'm sort of curious as to whether this whole big section about the discussion of COVID is really still necessary a couple of years post the COVID hybrid model that we had in place. What are your thoughts on that?
So their transcript still has reflections of COVID era when we were doing some specific grading. So there were things like a COVID pass. There were, so what we try to do with the profile, are you speaking about the profile? So we have that on there because the profile is the way that colleges interpret our transcript. And so they use that in conjunction. The profile goes with transcripts when they're sent so that they can make sense, because every school has their own nuances to how they are giving credit or what they're offering. And so we still have those impacts of COVID. So for kids who were fully remote, their transcript still says that because it's the record for those things. So we're trying to explain what that meant and where those grades came from.
So it would stay on there until essentially until it was no longer appeared on anyone's transcript.
Right. So last year. Mm-hmm.
Other questions for Jen? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we're back to public comment. Okay, so I would take a motion to adjourn. Maura, Beth, all those in favor? None opposed. Great. See y'all next week.